Hello, it's Andrea from Chasing Whimsy. I posted this in the group and I wanted to actually just do a walkthrough to show you the steps that were involved in doing this. I often do walkthroughs like this on my YouTube channel. I am a little bit behind and I wanted to do one a month. Been away and just haven't had the time to do that, so I'm going to try to catch up on those for you folks. What I do, it's very hard for me to actually just show a start to finish. It's pretty much impossible for me to just show working on an image that way because the process, it takes so long that it would be really boring. And when I'm spending up to 10 hours sometimes doing one image, it doesn't work to show you just straight through, and I'm trying different things and things that don't work. I've explained before how just doing a walkthrough and showing everything doesn't necessarily, I get that it doesn't really show the process the same way, but it sort of makes it look easier, I guess, than it is, because you're not seeing all the parts that I've tried that didn't work, for example. However, what I usually do with a walkthrough is I just go through and I turn on the layers and explain to you what I've done throughout the image, which I think gives a pretty good overview of the process, at least. And then if you want more details on specifics, that's where you can go in and look at perhaps purchasing tutorials that I have created that will explain further the actual process of what I'm doing. Again, all this stuff is available online. I'm pretty much all self-taught, and I've spent years researching YouTube, and all of this is out there if you have the time to find it. There are a lot of people that just don't have the time or just can't be bothered and would like to have it all put together in one place for them, and that is what I've done in my tutorials, and in order to be able to offer that back and save you the time in doing that, just by having it all in one place. Again, there's a million ways to do things as well. This is the way that I do it, and so if you have some kind of a rapport with me, you like my work, maybe that'll just be the little thing you need to have things click in seeing how how I work and what my workflow is. So this was the image that I did for my brother. That's my brother in the middle. He's an electrical engineer, amazing guy, love him to pieces, and he had done a charity calendar with a bunch of his geek friends. So every month was a different geek picture. So this was him being Circuito, which was a circuit superhero, and a couple of his colleagues as well. And this was the image that was actually on the calendar, but he wanted something a little more epic, and so he sent it to me to see what I could do, and I will show you what I did with that. So the first thing obviously is that this needs to be cut out, and I think I used a combination of the pen tool and the what do you call this? The quick selection tool, to just go around and get the edge fairly close to what I needed. And then you go back and refine however you're going to do those sort of things. So once I had done that cutout, I actually filled the background with white so that I had a nice clean background to work with and not have to fuss with all of the other stuff that was in there. And it helped me to see where I needed to go in and clean up the edges. So I went in as close as possible. There was a lot of fiddly work around the edges. It didn't need to be totally perfect because I knew that I was going to be putting in a different background that would have a lot of texture and stuff, so it wouldn't really show those sort of things. But again, that can all be fixed and adjusted once you have those into your background. So the first thing that I did was all of my retouching on this image, which included basically just some curves adjustment. So if I turn that off again, everything is quite dark on here because they were wearing black and it wasn't lit with flash or anything like that. So I took the in curves, I've done a kind of an up and a down in the curves, just to start lightening the whole thing for the most part. It makes it look a little bit washed out, but I'm going to go back and be doing the dodge and burn on top of that, so that's okay. I wanted to bring in some more of the detail that are in the black. So if I turn it off and you look at her, you can hardly see any detail, but bringing up the curves has brought in some of that. You can see I even missed a few spots here, but that all gets fixed as we're working on this. So that was the first thing that I did. I then did another curves adjustment to really, so I could see the detail work of what I needed to dodge and burn, because just by lightening it, that's just bringing up the curves. As you can see down here, I've just brought it up to the left a little bit just to lighten those shadows, so you can see the detail come out. If I turn that off again, I'm just bringing it in so I can see where I need to do my highlight and shadows. And that's totally fine to do that because you're going to bring that back in, and you can then turn the contrast or turn the curves down later, again, if it's too bright, but this just allows you to see into those shadows where there wasn't much detail. So that was what I did on the first on the first adjustments for that. I'm just going to grab the next file. I do several files usually. I'll do some initial work to kind of set up my base, and then I will save that and I'll start a new Photoshop file that's flattened. So I have all these sort of stop points along the way in my workflow. I just find that works better for me. I don't get a huge file with 50,000 layers in it. I can kind of go to a point where I'm happy with it and that I could return to as I'm trying, starting new portions of the edit. And so I find that that works really well for me. So I'm going to grab the next file for you. Okay, so I have my superheroes cut out. There they are. I'm now going to show you how I built the background, which is kind of what I was doing with this next portion. So I'm going to turn them off and just show you what I used. I have stock collected from everywhere over the years. I honestly can't tell you where this stock came from. Some of it's my own. Sometimes I take my own stuff. I'm actually trying to do more of that, just so you're not dealing with copyright issues or licensing and things like that. But anyway, so with this one, I wanted a, thunderclouds kind of going on in the background. So that was my thunderclouds. There was a little bit on the bottom of it that I got rid of. So that's just kind of a soft mask off on the bottom. And then the ground, I needed this perspective of it going back like that. And then there were these hills that were kind of in here. I think that was all part of the same background. So I wanted to make it sort of appear that they were on a platform like the top of a cliff. And so that is just over top of that. And then I've done a mask to get rid of that. Obviously on top, there's a few bits that need to be cleaned up still. And then I stick my people on top of that. So this is kind of the initial setup, getting them positioned where I want them. And then we go from there. These next two steps, there were some little bits that I missed when I did the adjustments to lighten the shadows. And so I've just, on these two layers, I've just fixed all of those so they're all the same all the way around. Then these were some flames that I added around the bottom of the book, so it looks like it's, on fire. I then found actually a tutorial on creating, I wanted something like the Matrix drop stuff. So this was a tutorial on creating, I can't even remember where I found it. I Googled create the matrix or something in Photoshop and found a way to do this. That was really cool. And so I made my own kind of matrix thing going on in there and adjusted the levels, etc. on that. You can't even really see a levels adjustment. So that is, again, just brushed in, and you can see from the mask here, I just sort of faded it in where I wanted it. So it was sort of tracing around them to kind of give some cool techie stuff. So that was this file on that. I then saved it, flattened it, and went on to the next one. One moment. Phase 3 of this image. We have all of this here from the previous file. I started going in and doing some touch-up stuff on this now with their faces and things. First of all, I darkened the whole thing with a curves layer. So this was just over the entire thing. I've just dropped the curves down a little bit, pulled it straight down from the middle. So from that to start adding some of that depth back in. You can see they're still washed out because I haven't done the dodge and burn on them yet. But it's starting already to give more blend. You can also see that I've added shadows down here, which I don't see in this image. Where are they? My apologies. They must be in here somewhere. There we go. So with the shadows, so this is where they were before. First, I did just a new layer. And this is actually just with a black brush. I just went in and started adding the shadows. The light is coming kind of from above them, so the shadows are sort of going to be coming forward. You're not going to have a lot of long shadows or anything because the light's from above. So I've done a basic shadowing around the bottom with the brush. And then I used curves, actually. I pulled down the curves so that I would actually just tint the ground, because I actually wanted the shadow to have the color that was in the ground. So you can see that I've pulled it way, way down to create a depth here and then just brushed it in as the shadows that. So I'm actually darkening what's there to keep the coloring sort of with that. And then I duplicated that as well. Did it again to add more right around their feet where it's going to be darker closest to them. And this is all just done with a paintbrush. You always have your shadows darkest next to them, and then it feathers out as you come away from them. So that was the basic shadowing, which you see instantly grounds them into your image. Shadows are so important when you're doing composite work to have your images look grounded. Okay, so let's go back up here. I don't even know if it's worth showing you this. I did a little bit, her eyes were it wasn't a very sharp image either, and you can fix a lot of that with dodge and burn because you're basically painting back in the details. So it's a lot of work. Starting with a great image is better, a sharp image, but it's amazing what you can do when you're actually painting things back in. So I just whitened her eyes a little bit. It can be a little bit surreal in this because they're so small in the image, and it is a surreal image, so I'm not worried about quite as much about the realism of what I'm doing. So I just wanted to brighten her eyes, and I believe I did the lashes on this girl. If you look at her eyelashes, I've just darkened that. That's again just it's actually an action from Greater Than Gatsby in their retouch set, but you could do the same thing with burning it down with your with curves and drawing a line, or even just painting black over top of them. Those are all different ways to do it. So that was the lashes. Next step, I then did a stamped layer of everything just so that I have kind of a fresh base to start on. That's if you don't know how to do that, that is a Control-Alt-Shift-E. And it'll take everything that's below and combine it into one sort of flattened layer that you can then move on from. I changed the eye whites on my brother. Just brightened those a little bit. Again, you could use curves for that. This was the eye whitening from the Gatsby collection. Then I started my dodge and burn. And I'm just going to turn that on. And you see the amazing difference. Let me just zoom in on this, on how this starts to look illustrated. I'll turn it off. Everything's kind of flat. With the dodge and burn, using curves, which is what I do, I make one layer that is a curves going downwards and one layer that's curves going up. That's how I do my dodge and burn. That's what I teach in my course. So I do the down stuff first, the shadows. I'll do the shadows. Everywhere that you see shadows, you just start building that in. I usually work about 20% with my brush and just start building it up, touching everywhere that you see shadows in the image naturally. And then the same for the highlights. And it's the highlights that actually create the really illustrated painted look, having more highlights. So it's more than you would do on a normal portrait. And the more highlighting that you do, shadows are important too, but the highlighting really is the key for getting that painted illustrated look. So here again is how they look now that they've got some dimension built into them. So I've gone around, cheeks and hair, and I will do more of it again throughout the process, but this was the initial part of that. So again, off and on. You can start to see all those great details coming in on their dresses. She had a little piece of her cape right here that I missed, and so I was just fixing that. I think I just painted the color over top of it. What's this? I then did I believe this is I used Topaz Adjust for one feature that it has. It has a setting called Mild Details, which is, it's sort of a sharpening, it's sort of a enhancement of what is there, but as you'll learn in my dodge and burn course, it's one of those tools that you can push it on just an image as it is, and yeah, it'll do something, but it only will grab onto what is already in the image. So if you actually spend the time to go in and hand paint all your dodge and burn stuff and then you run that, it just is like wow, because it has so much more to grab onto than just doing it. That's why you usually cannot just push a button and achieve this kind of effect. It takes the time to actually hand paint it, because that's why it looks painted, is because you are hand painting it. But then when you take a tool, so watch all of them, you can see how that just brings in some grit and some sharpness to all of them that also adds to that comic book feel. And that's using, so I make a duplicate layer again. I run the Topaz, it's called Mild Details in Topaz Adjust. And then I turn it off and I just mask it back on when I want it, where I want it. A lot of times I just do it on hair when I'm doing my fairies, for example, but anywhere that because I wanted this more gritty, I've done it over all of them, as you can see, and the ground that they're standing on. I didn't mind the back, I kind of left because I didn't mind it blurry. But that, as you can see, is really starting to bring in some clarity to using that. You could probably use, something like a sharpening. You can try the filters in Photoshop, the sharpening, make the unsharp mask, things like that, or even bumping up your play with the highlights and things like that. But, I found that tool and it works great. It just adds that little pop that I love. And I think it's like $40 to buy Topaz. I use it a lot, so it's worth it to me. What did we do next? I added the lightning bolt coming down onto the book. That was just from lightning, and masked that in. I think it was probably on a black background. I think it's actually, the layer is on screen. When you change something with a black background to screen, the black will disappear and just leave the light part. So there was my lightning bolt masked in, and then I added a dot of pink glow around that. That was just like a fuchsia color as a dot set on screen that is creating that glow there. And let's just grab the next file. This is almost done actually, but I have a few more files to finishing touches because I'm one of those people that, is this finished yet? Is this finished yet? And I keep going. This file is a whole bunch of little finishing sort of touches or little additions that just really help to up the magic on this image. The first thing I did actually was I did another dodge over top of them using curves, as you can see. That was just doing the highlights. And as I said, the highlights are what give it that illustrated look. Just zoom that in again. So before and after, and that's just touching all the light spots, going over everything that has light and all these great leather creases and things like that, all his pants creases, his muscles. Turn it off again, off and on. So just further enhancing what I had done the first time, and it's really starting to look comic book now, which is really cool. I then wanted a little to enhance these shadows back here a little bit more, so I just did a down curves layer, pulled it down, a little bit of adjustment down. It was actually down here to just get those deep blues in there, and I've just masked it in right there on the corner. So off and on, just to add more shadow behind them, bring that focus spotlight onto them. I did, there's just a little tiny piece of the lightning up here that I needed to touch up. So that's just zooming in now and fixing little bits that maybe were not quite masked in properly. I've then added another one of those big pink glows at the top. You can see that was another big pink fuchsia glow on screen, way up there, like it's big like this all the way around, just to add that glow, and that actually spills onto them a little bit. Really cool. This is like done with a, like you do a big brush like this and it'll just spill over all of them. Then we did, okay, so there's lightning bolts here. I'm adding lightning bolts to each of the girls' hands. So that's the one on the left. And then I added them on the right because they're obviously feeling the power as well. And then another one of those dots on each of their hands to emulate the where the lightning is hitting and the glow that that's causing. I honestly cannot see what I did on these layers. There's some drop shadows and things, so I was probably zoomed in doing stuff, and it was so minor, and I can't even see what it is right now, and I'm not going to bother worrying about it because it's not going to really affect a whole lot of the image. It was probably something I just saw when I was zoomed in, so don't worry about it. I then added a vignette all around the edges, like so. And just to darken that and again bring the focus in on them. And I think I just drew that in with a black, maybe it was a vignette that was added onto it, a colored vignette. Oh, sorry, it was the Federal vignette from the Greater Than Gatsby. So it's like a dark blue edge. You could do the same thing with black, just kind of paint it in or do a circle, however, an ellipse, and then make your vignette with some feathering. It actually doesn't look like it's feathered quite enough. I may have fixed that later, but anyways, always feather your vignette. And then I made her lips red. Just added some color in there to her lips. That was also from Gatsby, their lips thing, but I mean, you could color over top, you could do it however you do your retouching for that sort of thing. So that was what was added in this file. I think we're almost done. All right, some final fiddly bits on this. I'll just show you for the sake of showing you the techniques. You kind of see the basic buildup, but then I'll just show you some of the last things that you do to make sure that things are looking good. On my brother's arm here, I don't know if this was a part of the mask cutout. I thought this looked funny compared to this side. So I actually painted and cloned in a piece of his arm there. So that was just, I may have even taken a bit from this side and copied it over. If it looks like it, I actually reversed it. The elbow mark is the same. So I took a piece here, copied and pasted it to this side and just masked that in to make his arm look more adjusted because it was wonky there. So that was just bad masking, or maybe the image didn't look right at the beginning. This girl on the right, I actually painted in some more because she was quite fuzzy. Again, it's not a high quality image to start with, so but it's being printed. They're very small in the image, and even it was printed at about 16 by 20, I think. But this is fine because you can still. There's enough detail in this that it wouldn't matter. It was a low-res image, but it was fine. But her hairs weren't standing out quite as much, so I took that's just a white brush, and actually painted in strands of color to just give her hair a little bit more detail. And then on this girl's hair, I think I darkened it a little bit. Yeah, so with her, she didn't have a lot of detail in her hair either, so I painted in some dark on her hair, dark and light. And I just chose colors from her hair and actually drew in streaks of hair to give her some more detail on her hair because it was too fuzzy compared to the detail that we had in the other things. So that's another thing I will do if there isn't a lot of detail in my, like in a fairy, for instance, they have very smooth hair that doesn't show a lot of highlight and shadow. I'll actually draw in some strands so that I can have something to dodge and burn. In this case, I just used the colors because she's already sort of dodge and burn, and that worked great to just add those streaks in. And then my brother said that he was wearing a cape, as you can see, but it was sort of bunched behind him, and so he wanted more cape. So I found a picture of a piece of fabric and just kind of started warping and shaping it in behind him. I added, that's what it looked like, and then I added in the effects, I did a color overlay and a gradient overlay just to make it lighter and going down to dark in the bottom. I then needed to do some shading on that to darken this side for the light being at the top. And then, of course, I've just kind of pieced it around him so his shirt is all wonky. So I needed to fix that, which I think I actually do up a little bit higher. We'll come back to that. This girl, she's got some cutout wonky stuff there you can see, and so I've just gone in and fixed those edges on her. Probably by cloning, by the looks of it. I just cloned in. That was a pain in the butt, but that was just me not paying attention to my cutout as closely, and I should have done that earlier. So it's just more work to go in and clone it, but you know, that was like zooming in and cloning all the way around. To fix that, there's my brother's shirt. So before and after, that was just removing some of the I think I copied the area of his shirt from below before I did the cape, and then I just put it back in, so he's got his shirt back. Looks much better. I then did some more dodge and burn on the cape. You can see there's before and after. This time I used a 50% gray layer. You just fill in with 50% gray, make a new layer, fill it with 50% gray, and then I don't use the actual dodge and burn tools hardly ever. And again, just painted with a black and white brush to bring in my highlights and shadows. So that's another way that you can do it. And I'm just doing quick things, I'll do that. This is something on the cape that I can't see. Oh, it's something on his pants. It's like little, I was just going in cleaning up little edges and things like that. So it's kind of fiddly bits. These again are little things that I can't even see unless I was zoomed in. We have another overall pink right here to add some more there. I then had to, same thing, his ankles looked a little thin to me, so that's how they were. So I've just cloned in some more shoe and ankle. Again, that would have been from the cutout process, not being perfect. And then we have I added little, my brother works, being an electrical engineer, he works with LED lights, so I thought I'm going to incorporate something that looks like LED lights. So she's got a hovering red one on her, in her hand, and I did a selective color adjustment. There was some red glow from the image back here, so I actually did a selective color and bumped the red, which just, as you can see, if you look at the behind her and her, that little glow thing, it's just added some red in there, so I've just sort of enhanced in that area where I wanted a little bit more of that red for some glow. And then this girl, I believe, gets a green dot. Yes. They're actually lens flares, so they come in as red, and then I changed it to green using a color adjustment. We are almost done here. The book needed some work. The book was a little bit hard to read, so there's a bunch of layers here where I'm fiddling around with the book. I used curves to darken the whole thing, just paint over the whole thing. I, adjusted brightness and contrast. What else have we got here? Another layer that I don't know what I did on. Oh, funny. I did a little bit more dodge and burn on this girl's cape here. Just here, I felt the highlights weren't strong enough, so I did just touched up on those highlights again. And again, I used the gray layer just because I was doing it quick. I don't always use curves, kind of just depends. Most of the time I use curves, but that's just another way to do it. I then did an overall curves adjustment again to create some vignette. I just painted that in on either side, brought it down and painted it in. A little more on the book again. This edge right here of the vignette I did end up fixing. You can see it there. So I've done a little bit of cloning right there to just fix that edge. And again, some more adjustments on the words there. And that is the finished image. I hope that gives you some insight into the process of that. And again, these are all the things that I teach. If you want to see it in more detail, you can find this stuff online. But if you want to see, learn it from me, I've created tutorials to show you that. Thanks.